Welcome back to the Lakers Takes podcast. This is episode 7. I am your host, Edwin Garcia, and today I'm talking about the Lakers winning 3 of their last 4 games, more bad news and some good news on the injury front, and some interesting games coming up this week. Let's get into it. First game that happened this week was Lakers versus Hornets. The Lakers won 126-123 in overtime, and this was a gritty, hard-fought win. It got a little murky in the fourth quarter. At the 3:39 mark, LaMelo Ball was fouled. He was supposed to shoot 2 foul shots. And then things got weird. There was a tech given to Melo. Russ was talking to the refs. He got a tech. There was a delay of game technical. And next thing you know, LaMelo shot 5 free throws. And the Lakers' lead was cut from 9 to 4. And then after that, it really did swing momentum. And next thing you know, it was a ball game. And the Hornets were right back in it when the Lakers looked like they were about to take control of the game. It went into overtime. And luckily, the Lakers were able to pull it off and close the game, and that was largely due to Anthony Davis. He was incredible. He scored 6 of the team's 11 points in overtime, and he really was just a great soldier for the team in this game. He had 44 minutes, 32 points, 12 rebounds. You really can't ask much more from Anthony Davis. He was amazing. Other positives as well was Russell Westbrook. His shooting wasn't there, but his assists were there. His rebounds were there. He had 14 assists, 12 rebounds, 17 points. I think he had a decently good game. And of course, Carmelo Anthony. I mean, Staples Center Melo continues to be a thing. He shot 70% from 3. How insane is that? 70%. And it wasn't just like he hit 3 out of 4. No. 7 for 10 from the 3-point line, 29 points in 37 minutes. It was absolutely incredible, and Carmelo has really been the gift that keeps on giving. Again, Lakers Nation loves him. He loves playing for Lakers Nation. The minute he hits a 3, Staples Center erupts every time. It's unlike anything I've ever seen from the Lakers. The only player who gets this kind of love is LeBron James. And why LeBron gets that love is obvious. So the fact Carmelo's getting that kind of love is impressive. And, he's having fun out there being a Laker, and he's producing at an extremely high level. Really no complaints with Carmelo Anthony in this game. This year, overall, he's been fantastic. After the game, we did get some bad news on the injury front. Rondo and Austin Reeves with left hamstrings that were sore. And that's definitely an issue, definitely a concern. I wouldn't say a huge concern, but just a concern, because especially with hamstrings, they can be, annoying, ongoing injuries that last for a while. You can feel like your hamstring's good, and then you run for 5 or 10 minutes, and it flares up. It begins to irritate you. It's a problem. And again, the Lakers' injury list at this point is enormous. After the Hornets game, heading into the Lakers versus Heat matchup, you had Austin Reeves with a hamstring issue, Rondo with the same hamstring issue. You had THT, who's been out all year, Nunn, who's been out all year, Ariza, who's been out all year, and LeBron James, who's out currently with the abdominal strain. So that's just a lot of players you're expecting to be part of the team, contribute to the team, and you can't replace those players. You're just short. And despite all that, the Lakers went up against the Heat, who I think are part of the title contending tier in the NBA. And I think most people agree the Heat have been a very good team. And the Lakers had to play the Heat, missing all of those players. And despite all of that, they got another great win. Lakers got good games from Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook. Anthony Davis had 24 points, 13 rebounds. Again, he's been so dominant on the boards, which is great to see. He's always been a good rebounder, but I think this year he's definitely, stepped it up in these games, especially with LeBron out. And Russell Westbrook, again, 25 points, 14 assists, 12 rebounds. I mean, he was doing everything you want from him. He did have a late game shot that, some people weren't happy about, but I think overall you have to be satisfied with the kind of Russ performance you got. And Malik Monk, the Monk propaganda is strong. 27 points, in 35 minutes off 10 for 13 shooting from the field, 4 for 7 from 3. And with Monk, again, that's why he's nicknamed the microwave, because when he gets hot, he gets going, and you got to watch out. Now with Malik Monk, you also get those other games, right? The games where his defense is poor, he's a little bit cold, and then it's like, well, what's the point of this guy being on the court? So that happens every now and then. Again, he's a minimum contract player. I think he's definitely better than that, and I think he will get a better contract after this season. But there's a reason he's a minimum contract player. There are flaws with his performance, but when he's good, man, you don't just get like an okay game. You get an incredible game. And I think that the highs versus the lows, you'll take the highs even if the lows are maybe a little more common than you think. And this game was definitely a high. Malik Monk, brought it. He played so well. A negative for the Miami Heat on their injury front was Jimmy Butler went down during the first half with a sprained ankle. He did not return, and now they'll have to wait and see what his timetable is for recovery and when he can kind of consistently play again. So that was a bummer for the Miami Heat. But, just like the Lakers have suffered injuries, the Heat are suffering injuries. The injury bug kind of gets you. You just hope it's nothing catastrophic. For the Lakers so far, I wouldn't call it catastrophic. It's just been really bad. But, unfortunately, sorry for that for Jimmy Butler. As I've always said, you never want to wish injuries on anyone and hope that anyone gets hurt at all. You want everyone to be healthy, and it's a shame that he got injured. Hopefully, he has a speedy recovery. I mean, a sprained ankle seems like, it's painful and annoying, but nothing too serious. So hopefully he can come back in a couple weeks or so, and he'll be back to being Jimmy Butler, because that's always good for the Miami Heat, and it's good for the NBA. Next, we have the Lakers versus Timberwolves game, and woof, this one was just absolutely brutal. Lakers lost 107-83, and even that score doesn't really, tell the full story of how bad the Lakers were, especially in that second half. In that second half, they completely fell apart. They had a 40-12 third quarter. They gave up 40 points and scored 12. That's hard to do. It's almost impressive how ridiculous that was. Honestly, this game was one you just flush it down the toilet. You just ignore it. Just don't look anymore. It was so bad. When I was talking to Lakers Nation after the game, I was talking to Lakers Nation on Twitter and on TikTok, where I do my live streams using the same handle, Lakers Takes. I noticed that some people were kind of almost frustrated at me for not being frustrated at them. Some people thought I was being too much of a homer, and I was saying, let's just forget this game. And they were like, the effort wasn't there. And I was trying to explain to people, I'm like, no. It's not that the effort wasn't there. If the effort wasn't there, I would also be upset and frustrated. You could just tell that these players were tired. Their legs, you call them dead legs. When your legs are just too tired, anyone who's played basketball for a long period of time, even just on one day where you play like 3 or 4 hours, you know what that means. Dead legs means your legs no longer have the energy and bounce they had before, and it's now affecting your shot, it's affecting your stamina, you have fatigue, and you're kind of done. And when that happens, you're not going to be able to play or beat a team that doesn't have that. It's just not really possible. And you could see that was happening with the entire Lakers team in that third quarter. They just couldn't shoot anymore. They couldn't score. They were unable to get loose balls or fight for rebounds. And it wasn't a lack of will. It was a lack of ability because they just got tired. Why are they tired this early in the season? Well, just like I mentioned before, it's the injuries. You don't have LeBron. You don't have Reeves, you don't have Rondo, you don't have Ariza, you don't have THT, you don't have Kendrick Nunn. It's a lot to overcome. And when you don't have those players, other players play more. Other players play more than they should. And next thing you know, they're exerting so much energy. Carmelo Anthony goes from playing 15 to 20 minutes to 24, 30 minutes, 35 minutes. Rondo had 24 minutes in this game. And everyone just has to pay the tax of those players missing. The next man up means the next man also has to produce, perform, and play for longer. And that just became too much for the Lakers. It kind of builds up. And then if you watch these games, Lakers versus Hornets, overtime win. Lakers versus Heat, overtime win. The Lakers are doing everything they can. If you watch these games, they were playing at the highest level of their ability, working so hard in their rotations, working so hard closing out on three-point shooters, working so hard to get productive offensive possessions. It's a lot to say. I have to give my absolute best for the team to win, or else we'll lose. Doing that game after game after game, that's a lot to ask of 8 or 9 players because of all the injuries. And it finally just kind of caught up to them. And that's what the loss was. It wasn't a game where the team wasn't giving effort. It was a game where the team was just mentally and physically exhausted from the week of games they've had to play and the level they had to play them at. And that's ultimately what happened here. So that's why I don't really judge this game that much. That's why I don't really, get upset about this one, because I saw it with my own eyes. I saw what happened. And I just don't expect them to typically be like this. Normally when they lose a game, it'll be because, the other team played better. And the Wolves definitely played better. Props to them, credit to them. They clearly played better. But clearly the Lakers couldn't get to their best because of the things I just mentioned. One thing I did find interesting was the Lakers, and Frank Vogel specifically, started the small ball lineup everyone's been asking for. You got AD at the 5, Bazemore, Russell Westbrook, Avery Bradley, and Wayne Ellington. I think that was a very interesting lineup to go with the small ball 5 lineup, something that everyone's been asking for, clamoring for. It's been obvious that that's something that people think will help with spacing, put AD in the best position, and overall help the team. Obviously, this game was not good evidence for that, but I think it was still interesting that he did it. Also interesting, DeAndre Jordan goes from starter to DNP. And that's really interesting, seeing that happen. That's a huge drop-off from being the starting center to you don't play at all. And I think it's something that we should be on the lookout for moving forward. Something else we should be on the lookout for moving forward is THT, because shortly after the game, we found out that THT is on the way. He was cleared to play, and he went from, being on the injury report to being upgraded to probable on the injury report, and that really got Lakers Nation excited. A lot of Lakers Nation, myself included, have mentioned, hey, the injuries are really making it hard for this team to show their true potential and for us to know how good this team can be. We just need to wait and see how things go after this team gets healthy, and then we can really have a fair, assessment of the team. Getting someone like THT back, the 4th highest paid player on the team, one of the 3 players that came back from last year's team, and a player who's so young with all the potential in the world at 20 years old. That's something that Lakers Nation really got excited about, and was a highlight of a low light of events in that Lakers-Wolves game, getting the news that THT was likely playing. And it became even more hyped after that because we found out not only is THT playing, not only was he probable, he was going to play, not only that, he started. He started in his first game of the season after missing all the games that have happened so far. So that was incredible. Again, Lakers Nation's, energy for that was at an all-time high, as it should be. That was amazing. And the Lakers, again, started with another small ball lineup. So it was interesting, again, seeing no DeAndre Jordan. You had Carmelo Anthony at the 4, AD at the 5, Russell Westbrook, Avery Bradley, and Talen Horton-Tucker. And I told people that I thought THT would be a starter on this team eventually. I didn't think he'd start there right away, but this is the first game. I'm expecting there'll be some games he does come off the bench. And I do think later in the season, once we get to April, May, March even, I think we will see THT starting. But I was surprised as well, and I was pleasantly surprised, and that THT started, and that the team has gone away from DeAndre Jordan in back-to-back games against the Spurs. Now, DeAndre, another DNP. He did not start. He did not play at all. Also, Bazemore. Bazemore's been a player who's been disappointing, a player who hasn't lived up to what the team thought he would be. He has lived up to what I thought he would be because I didn't think he was very good. So, unfortunately, that's turned out to be pretty true. But now the team seems to realize it as well because he got a DNP now that THT is back. So it's interesting. As pieces come back, we start to see what the pecking order looks like. Again, we're starting to get more information on what the team's actually going to be. And we're starting to see, hey, look, 2 players who played a lot recently. You get back a couple players, and now they're not playing anymore. So that's pretty interesting. And again, THT started in the game, and he was spectacular. 17 points, 50% from the field, 27 minutes. He was really, really good. He looked really, really good. Obviously, his wrist injury, I'm sure it wasn't easy or fun to kind of recover from, but it did allow him to work out the rest of his body and keep himself in NBA shape and be NBA ready. So he was able to jump in there and already give you 27 minutes and start on day 1 and look pretty good. So that was impressive. I don't think I've said it yet. The Lakers won 114-106, which was another good thing after that terrible loss against the Timberwolves. Kind of washed that away in this Sunday matinee early game at 12:30. Lakers were able to pull off the W and put themselves in a good position to start the week. Now currently 8-6 in the Western Conference. AD was spectacular. There's just no denying it. 34 points. 15 rebounds. He had 19 points in the first quarter. 19 points in the first quarter. He was bullying those San Antonio Spurs. They did not have an answer for him. They did not have anything for him, and he just continued to dominate the entire game. That was impressive to see. And another Malik Monk game. He was, again, the microwave, the monk propaganda, 16 points on 60% shooting. He was so positive coming off the bench, and even more positive than him. You'd think he'd be the best player on the bench today. He was not. That goes to Wayne Ellington. 15 points, 5 for 7 from 3. That was just ridiculous. He couldn't miss. His shot looks so good. It looks like a textbook jumper. It was so silky smooth, and he was just hitting all of it. And I've been really impressed with Wayne Ellington. He's definitely been a player who's made me eat my words. I thought that he was kind of more on the Bazemore side, where he wouldn't be very productive, wouldn't be very good, and not give you much. And so far, I'm pleasantly surprised that I'm wrong. I think he can give more than I thought he could. He's a responsible vet. He knows his role. He knows how to play it well. And if he's shooting, he doesn't have to shoot 5 for 7 from 3 every night. But if he can even shoot, 40 to 50%, be somewhere in that higher range, above, I think 40 would be pretty good to me. He's definitely going to, if he can do that, he'll definitely perform above and beyond what I expected of him. And that's a huge positive, because if he can do more than I thought, that gives the Lakers another weapon, another guard who can be productive on the roster. And you could always use more good guards, that's for sure, especially with all the injuries going on with the Lakers. So despite everything, despite all the struggles, the Lakers went 3 for 4 this week. I'm really impressed with that. 3 for 4 without LeBron. No LeBron in any of the games. They won 3 of the 4. Despite everyone complaining about how the teams performed and how bad they look, hey, they're 3 for 4 in those games without LeBron. I mean, they only could have won one more game. That's all they could have done this week. So I think that's pretty positive. And you look at the standings, it's still too early, I think, to really, do standing watch and looking over. There's a few teams in front of the Lakers, but they haven't played as many games, but they have 8 wins and 4 losses, 8 wins and 5 losses. So we'll see what happens here. So again, that's why I'm not really concerned about where the Lakers are. It's early in the season, so it's not like there's going to be a huge, gap at this point. If there is, you're probably playing really, really, really bad. But still, I look at that and I say, okay, 1 or 2 good weeks here when LeBron comes back, and they'll be right where I thought they would be, which is around top 3, top 4 in the conference. And I think that's realistic for how competitive the West is. To be top 3, top 4, that's kind of where you want to be. And then, all depends on matchups, et cetera, when we get to those, playoff matchups, which we're still very, very far away. So, yeah, I still feel really, really good about this team. Again, it's going to come down to LeBron. And speaking of LeBron, let's do a quick update on his injury. So he's been upgraded to day-to-day. Frank Vogel said he's truly day-to-day. It can be any day now. There have been some reports from ESPN that he's doing great and he's very, very close to coming back. How close? I don't know. Will he play on Monday? That's the next Lakers game. They just played on Sunday against the Spurs. Will he play Monday against the Bulls? Will he play Wednesday against the Bucks? Those are the questions that are left at this point, is when will we see LeBron? And personally, I don't think we see him against the Bulls. We'll find out, in a few hours, as I'm recording this at nearly midnight. So there's only so much more time before the Lakers will announce it. I'm going to guess no, just because it's the last game at home and then they're on the road. I think he'll just start playing on the road coming up. But we'll see. Nothing would surprise me with LeBron. I think he's really healthy. I think he's ready to go. So obviously they're being extremely cautious, and it's early in the season, but I think he's ready to go. So I would like to see him play. But we'll just have to wait and see how things go. Either way, I think we'll see him this week. I think he'll play a lot this week. And they're going to need him because they got a couple challenging games and then a couple that are maybe not as difficult. So let's go over the games coming up this week. The Lakers play the Bulls on Monday, so it's part of a back-to-back. Very interesting. The Bulls have a back-to-back and the Lakers have a back-to-back. It's all been LA-based, right? The Lakers have been home. They just beat the Spurs, and now they got to play the Bulls. And the Bulls just beat the Clippers, and now they got to play the Lakers. So they're staying in Staples Center. They're staying in LA for an extra 24 hours and playing the Lakers as well. And they beat the Clippers, so we'll see if they can do the LA sweep and also take care of business against the Lakers. Hopefully they don't, but we're going to find out. It'll be interesting. It's the Caruso game. It's the Lonzo game. A lot of LA-Chicago connections here, and it's going to come to a head on Monday. It'll be really interesting to see how the crowd reacts. Be really interesting to see how the energy is, and the Lakers will need LeBron if they want to win. I think without LeBron, good luck beating that team. That team's young, they're hungry, they're really good. We don't even know how good they're going to be, but they're playing pretty good basketball right now to start the season. So I think the Lakers really have to bring it, and to really bring it, you need LeBron. But again, we're still waiting on an update, and we haven't gotten any official word of whether he's going to play or he'll be out. So hopefully he plays, but at the time of this recording, we just don't know yet. All the other games happening are going to be on the road. It's going to be an East Coast trip here. So if you're it's going to be a Midwest East Coast trip here. So if you're in the West Coast, the times are going to be a little weird here. So it's a rough week to watch these games for most of us. Here's the order of the games here. We have Lakers versus Bucks on Wednesday at 4:30 Pacific time. That's early. And then we have Lakers Celtics 4:30 again. And then that's on Friday. And we have Lakers Pistons on Sunday at 3 p.m. So all very, very early games. So adjust yourself accordingly. If you usually watch the Lakers games after you're done with your 9 to 5, you're going to have to make adjustments for Wednesday and Friday. Sunday obviously wouldn't affect you that way. But yeah, definitely check, because the time you normally watch Laker games, that's not the time these games are going to occur. So there's going to be an adjustment period here. We'll see if we can all do a good job with that and handle that well. And I'm hopeful the Lakers can have a good week here. I think a good week would be winning 2 or more games this week. If LeBron plays in all of them, you have a really good chance to go 3 or even get the full sweep. But I think winning 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, that would be productive. Anything less than that, I think, would be disappointing, even without LeBron. You don't want to lose that many games. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping we get a 2 out of 4 or 3 or more wins of these 4 games coming up. So we'll see what happens. All right, that's just about going to do it for us here on the Lakers Takes podcast. I wanted to mention it earlier, but it just kind of slipped my mind. But the YouTube version does not have my wonderful face on it. I'm just experimenting with some different things, and I'm trying out this model of just having the audio and having an image there, seeing if people like that more. So if you watch on YouTube, or if you're listening on YouTube, let me know if you like this better, if you kind of don't like it and you want to see me there. I'll likely put myself back on camera for the podcast again next week, but some feedback's always helpful, especially if you watch on YouTube. It lets me know what you're thinking, what you like, what you don't like, and ways I can improve. If you're an audio listener, this podcast probably sounds the same as it always does, but maybe you think it sounded better today. Maybe the fact that I don't have to look at the camera kind of helps me talk a little bit more, relaxed or something of that nature. So if you think this podcast was especially good, way better than the other ones or something like that, let me know. Maybe that's a factor I need to think about. But overall, the audio version should be pretty much the same, and you probably don't notice anything at all. But give me some feedback if you're watching on YouTube, or even if you're listening to the podcast. You can always leave a review on iTunes, or you can leave a comment on my YouTube channel, or you can just tweet at me at Lakers Takes, or send me a comment on TikTok at Lakers Takes as well. And I'll always be checking out what's going on there and what people think. So let me know what you think, and we'll be back next week after these games to talk about these games. Hopefully the Lakers have some success this week that we can talk about it and are kind of jumping up in the standings and getting healthier, which is number one. The main topic for next week, it will be defensive nuances. I'm not sure what the title of that will be, but the podcast normally has, as we mentioned before, has a recap of the previous games and then a big picture story. This week I didn't do one because I wrote on Lakers-Takes.com about the starting lineups and 5-man lineups, and I already talked about that, so the article was released. It did really, really good numbers on the site. It was one of my most popular articles, ever, and definitely of this year. So give it a read if you like the conversation. I think I went even more in detail in the writing of the 5-man lineup. So I think it came out pretty good. I'm really proud of it. I knew it was good, and then it's good when you feel like you did good work, and then the views also match that. That's always a good feeling. That can be sometimes rare. So I really appreciate everyone who clicked on the article and gave it a read. And if you haven't done so, please do so. I think it was a pretty good one, so check it out. This week, I'm going to write again about the defensive nuances. I want to talk about the defensive things we don't normally see. So not the blocks or the steals, but things such as players avoiding shots because of a defender's presence and how they deter them from shooting and those kinds of things. And I'm going to talk about that, show some clips on YouTube of that, and show some images on Lakers-takes.com, kind of breaking that down. And then here we'll talk about those things in kind of different ways. We talk so much about offense, everywhere. Podcasts, articles, greatest players of all time. But defense is half of the game. Some would say the most important half of the game. So I want to get into that a little bit more and get into something beyond just blocks and steals. So I'm going to do that this week. It should be a fun one. And that'll be the main topic of the show next week, along with recapping the games and previewing the upcoming games. So be on the lookout for that. I'm looking forward to writing that this week, and I'm looking forward to talking about it next week during the podcast. So that's the end of the Lakers Takes podcast this week. That's the end of episode 7. Thank you so much for making it to the end. If you are listening on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And if you're listening anywhere else, make sure you're following this podcast on all podcast platforms you like so you don't miss an episode. They come out every Monday morning, West Coast time. And I appreciate each and every single one of you who listens. I keep track of the analytics. I'm looking at what's happening, and I'm really excited with what's going on here. So thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next week. Go Lakers.